Hello, humanities students. So, as you've been reading Fahrenheit 451 and looking over your questions, which I'm sure you are all working on right now, you probably realize that several of these questions ask you to properly embed and cite quotations. So, I wanted to take a minute to review what that looks like, because keep in mind that typically in a quarter, you have a lot of points because we're checking a lot of little assignments throughout the week. However, this quarter is definitely going to be a bit different. Obviously, with our online learning and with our very different circumstances that we're working with, you probably are not going to have as many assignments. So I want to make sure that the few assignments you guys do have, you're really doing your best work and that you really know what the expectations are and you know how to do your best work. So for Fahrenheit 451 Part 1, a lot of these questions ask you to properly embed, smoothly embed, and properly cite quotations. So let's just take a minute to refresh our memory on what this means. So first off, when we are embedding a quotation, what that means is we have a quotation, which is the author's words, that has been worked seamlessly into our own sentence. So if something is not embedded, that means the quote stands alone. It's just its own sentence in your writing. So this is an example right here of an embedded quote. When Shakespeare says, "What a piece of work is man," he shows man's artistic and complex nature. So notice we have the author's words, the person who is writing this, and then we have Shakespeare's words. And in this case, Shakespeare's words are worked into the author's word sentences. So this would be smoothly embedded. Now, here is an example of a quote that is not smoothly embedded. Shakespeare shows man is complex and artistic. Period. What a piece of work is man. So the issue here is we've got this period, we've got the author's words, the person who's writing this, then we have Shakespeare's words, and they're their own sentences. So this is not going to be okay for those questions that ask you to smoothly embed and properly cite a quote as evidence. Now this is actually what I see more common, this example right here, and I want you guys to really make sure you're avoiding this. So this is also not smoothly embedded. Shakespeare shows man is complex and artistic. What a piece of work is man. So our issue here with this one is that we've basically crammed the author's words with the quote together and created a run-on sentence. So it's not smoothly embedded. The author's words, the person who's writing this, does not flow smoothly into the quotation, Shakespeare's words. And this is the issue that I see most often when I'm looking at your guys' writing. So let's just review how we can smoothly embed our quotations and avoid doing things like this and this. All right, how do we embed evidence? Well, remember, there's 3 ways. The first way is to link the quotation to your own sentence with a semicolon. And this is great to help us solve this problem right here. Because remember, a semicolon is something that links to complete sentences. So you need 2 complete thoughts, 2 independent sentences that could stand alone in order to use the semicolon, which is what we have in this example right here. So this would be fixed and suddenly become smoothly embedded if the author had just used a semicolon. So we've got right here an example of a quote that's not embedded, right? Because we have the writer's words, the author's words, and then we have Bradbury's words, and they're all just standing alone. The way that we can fix this is simply by linking the 2 with a semicolon. But notice this only works because this is a complete sentence and this is a complete sentence. Meaning, both of these could stand alone and be completely fine, complete thoughts. All right, so that's a great method to use when you're embedding quotes, and that's something that you guys should definitely consider as you're working on these Fahrenheit questions. Let's look at 2 other methods you could use. The second way that you can embed a quote is to introduce the quote with your own words. I love this one. This is one that I use all the time when I'm writing. So again, here's our example that's not embedded because we have the writer's words. Montag reaches enlightenment because he learns books are valuable. And then we have Bradbury's words. Books show the pores in the face of life. 2 completely separate sentences, standing alone, so they're not embedded. We can fix this by taking out part of the words and using the author's words to introduce the quote. So now we have the person who's writing here, these are their words. Montag reaches enlightenment through books because they are valuable when they, and then we have here Bradbury's words, show the pores in the face of life. So we've used our words to introduce here our quote. We've used our words here to introduce this quote. This is also really easily done by saying something as simple as, we can tell that Montag is destructive when he says, and then your quote. Or Clarice is a character who values nature because she often says, and then your quote. So using things like the character says, or Bradbury says, or in the text, the reader learns that, and then your quote is a great way to embed. All right, the third way that we can embed quotations is to weave it seamlessly into our own sentence, to basically have the quote embedded completely within our sentence, where our sentence starts, the quote happens, and then our sentence ends. So here's our not embedded example. They eat shadows for breakfast and steam for lunch and vapors for supper. Those are just Bradbury's words, not at all mixed with the author's words, so it's not embedded. And then we have the author's words here. The people live an empty life that's not worth living. Now, a great way to fix this is to weave them together. So we have here our author's words, the people who. We switch to Bradbury's words, eat shadows for breakfast and steam for lunch and vapor for supper. And then we switch back to our author's words here, live an empty life that is not worth living. So we've got a quote that's completely seamlessly worked into our own sentence. All right, sometimes it helps to make changes to our quote because that allows us to more smoothly embed what the author is saying. So there's 2 ways, 2 things that you want to remember and be aware of as you're working with these quotes. The first is using brackets to show that something has been changed or added. So here's an example right here. When Shakespeare says, that's not what I wanted. Oh man. All right. When Shakespeare says, what a piece of work is human, he shows people's artistic and complex nature. So notice here, the author has added in the HU to man to make it seem more universal. So it can apply to all people and not seem like it's just talking about men. Another great method is to use the ellipses. And you use this to show that something has been removed. So there might be a really great quote that you want to smoothly embed to back up one of your questions, but it's really long and you only need certain parts of it. You can take things out by putting in the ... So we see that here. Shakespeare states, what a piece of work is man, ... how noble in reason, in order to convey man's complex mind. So the author has skipped words in the original quote. All right, last thing that you guys need to be able to do and that we'll be checking for is that you are properly citing these quotations. So remember, your in-text citation looks like this. You have your author's last name and the page number. So for our text, what that is going to look like, our author here is Bradbury, and then the number page that you're using. So for example, if I'm going to use the very beginning of Fahrenheit 451, I know it's kind of hard to see with all of our annotations, but I would use page 1. Now, depending on which copy of the text you're using will depend on which page numbers you're going to be choosing. So some of you may have a quote, "It was a pleasure to burn," and that may be on page 1. Others, because they have a different version of the text, that may be on page 3. So you're going to go with whatever version of the text that you have. Remember, this citation always goes at the end of your sentence, no matter where the quote is in your sentence. And the period always goes after the citation. So let's look at some examples of this. This first one is correct. Montag believes it was a pleasure to burn before he meets Clarice. Bradbury won, period. So notice we have the author, we have the page number, there is no comma in between the two, and then we have the period here at the end. And all of this is at the end of this sentence. So let's take a look at these 3 wrong examples and talk about what is wrong in them. Let's start with this first one. Montag believes it was a pleasure to burn before he meets Clarice, period, Bradbury won. So the issue here is this period. Remember, our period needs to go here. Let's look at example 2. Montag believes it was a pleasure to burn before he meets Clarice, period, Bradbury won, period. Okay, so again, we've got that pesky period. It's like a belt and suspenders. You're kind of doing double duty here. You don't need both of them. And then let's look at our third example. Montag believes it was a pleasure to burn Bradbury won before he meets Clarice, period. Okay, well, we've got our period in the right place. This is the end of the sentence, but the issue with this one is the citation is in the middle of the sentence. So remember, it doesn't matter where your quote is in the sentence. Your citation always goes at the end, right before this period. All right, guys, please do a really nice job with these questions because this will be one of your few assignments on quarter 4, and we really want to be seeing your best work. We can't wait to see what you guys come up with, and if you have any questions,